Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Makbool with you at B2B World. In today's show, we will be taking a look at some very important stories. The first is in reference to the Prime Minister's official visit to Turkey that has started. This is a 2-day official visit on the invitation of the Turkish president, in which the inauguration ceremony also took place of the third of 4 military corvette ships for the Pakistan Navy in Istanbul. And of course, as part of the joint collaboration between Pakistan and Turkey, this was an important occasion that the Prime Minister took part in. He also addressed the ceremony on this occasion and talked about various aspects of the relationship and how perhaps the deep historic ties of the relationship is something which we haven't seen translate into the kind of collaboration that is perhaps needed. And so in terms of the proportion of the depth of the relationship, perhaps the trade and investment and bilateral relationships aren't as much. So we're going to be taking a look at all of that, and we're going to understand exactly how that can actually happen. One thing that was said by the Prime Minister was the emphasis on the renewable energy, which he spoke about is Pakistan is of course currently in great need of, and so is perhaps the entire world as well. And this is important in terms of the kind of investment or collaboration that can be made by Turkey's side. Of course, the Prime Minister would also be meeting the Turkish business community as part of his engagements, and we're going to explore how all of this is going to then translate into the various aspects of the relationship that the Prime Minister was hinting at. That is going to be the focus of our first segment today. And in our next segment, we're going to take a look at something which is, of course, really important to Pakistan in terms of the current economic conditions. This is, of course, something that the resident IMF representative has said speaking to Reuters, and has spoken about how the plan with regards to the floods that have devastated the country, any finalization of the recovery plan is important in all of the discussions that are going to be held, and also in terms of the multilateral or bilateral support that Pakistan hopes to, of course, get in terms of supporting and rehabilitating itself from these floods. So this is going to be an important discussion in terms of what exactly will that take a look into, and what sort of a plan and strategies already exist, what aspects of this aspect is needed for Pakistan to be able to actually move forward with the recovery plan, and are we do we already have in place all of the data that is required for that, and then how exactly is that going to pan out in the discussions with the IMF, the 9th review, which of course is still pending. So we're going to be taking a closer look at all of that in our second segment of the show today. For this and more, of course, we've been joined by our experts as well, and we've been joined by senior analyst Farooq Madafi, as always, as part of the debate. For our first segment, with regards to the Prime Minister's visit to Istanbul, we've also been joined by Mr. Selçuk Aydin, who's a foreign affairs expert. I hope I took your name correctly. We've also been joined by Mr. Umar Karim, who's a foreign affairs expert, and Mr. Hanan Hussain, who's a journalist. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us and being a part of the debate. But let me start with you, Mr. Selçuk, since of course you're also, I'm told you're also based out of Istanbul, and so perhaps you'll give us a better idea of what is going on, and also in terms of the understanding of the importance of this relationship. Of course, we know what Pakistan deems important and how much the relationship with Turkey means to all of us. But in terms of the existing global challenges that the Prime Minister has reiterated in his address today as well, these are of course difficult times, and so the collaborations between countries, and especially those with which we enjoy deep historical ties, is very, very important. So first of all, the understanding of where we stand today in terms of our bilateral relationship, particularly in terms of trade and investment. What do you think can be done in terms of enhancing that, since of course it has been pointed out by the PM also that the depth is still not reflected in the way that we interact in terms of trade and investment. And then moving forward, in terms of this particular visit and the evolving dynamic in the world with regards to various conflicts as well, what more do you hope to see come out of this relationship?
Hello, can you hear me?
Mr. Seljuk,
Yes.
can you hear
Yes.
Sana? Could you respond to the question?
Yeah, thank you for having me. And also currently right now, President Erdogan and President Shahbaz is giving their speech to media. and both of the speakers are generally highlighting the historical relationship between Pakistan and Turkey, and both of them mainly highlight what we should do. First of all, Turkey's and Pakistan relation has very much historical significance, and last 2 decades it increased a lot, and particularly last decade, Turkey and Pakistan has a strategic cooperation, and which started from the economic relation, media relation, and particularly in the defense industry. And this covered ship is in the almost the last level because it is the third ship. It's called Hyderabad, and that's why they have a meeting. I want to also mention about our defense relation between Pakistan and Turkey. This relation shows that Pakistan and Turkey is in the same line in any case, and it is very significant. And President Erdogan mentioned Turkey's and Azerbaijan relation, which should enhance with Pakistan. That's why, because it also shows the understanding of the people of Turkey and the government as well, because the Turkey and Azerbaijan is we are connecting one nation, two states, and it also highlighted by Erdogan and Mr. Shahbaz as well. They say that there is a one heart and two countries, and they want to enhance this relationship, and they say that they want to improve the economic relation from around $1 billion to $5 billion within 3 years.
Right, absolutely. And Mr. Umar, I'd like to elaborate further on that in terms of course, the will or the commitment of this relationship to grow even further, especially in terms of economic aspects, is there and is reiterated at every such occasion. But I want to understand how exactly can that actually happen, and what seems to be the reason that we have not truly achieved the potential that this relationship has.
Thank you. I think that both sides have the political will, and this political will has been there for last few years. But the problem has been technicalities, and also the FTA, the free trade agreement. That has been a major hindrance, and till now it hasn't been signed. I think once it's signed, maybe bilateral trade can really increase. It's interesting that both Turkey and Pakistan, they are production. Turkey is a much bigger economy and much higher up in production, producing different goods. Pakistan, of course, textile has achieved global status, but I think there is some sort of missing mechanism, not only on the governmental level, but on the level of commercial board of commerce and businessmen between the two countries. So particularly maybe the Turkish business elite, they have been more centered on the European markets, perhaps African markets. But now I think there is a little bit of a turn or interest in the Pakistani market, of 240 million people. So why not just focus on this market? I think so. This is a little bit about also of Pakistan not being in that focus of attention, which now probably has started to change. But yeah, as both President Adkar and Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif mentioned, that $1 billion is really very, very small amount, and it should be.
Right, and that's an important aspect. Yes. Yes, and I'd like to explore a little bit more further as well. Mr. Hanan, considering that this is something that both sides have expressed numerous times before as well, and the emphasis, of course, with regards to the business community and where the private sector perhaps can interact more with each other, and in order to, of course, help the trade and investment grow both within Turkey and Pakistan, that's an important engagement. The Prime Minister, of course, is going to be interacting with the business community in Turkey on his visit, but in terms of bringing that investment in and attracting more and more Turkish businesses to come to Pakistan, what else can Pakistan offer?
Thank you, Sana, for having me. So I think, first of all, I think one of the reasons why it has taken several years to get the volume from about 600 million to about just over 1.1 billion, which is a bit scant considering the interest that these countries have. One of the reasons was that when you have these business-to-business interactions, beyond state visits, there's a huge vacuum to connect businesses across these private arrangements, these private exchanges, which can obviously stem beyond sectors that have been traditionally welcomed by both countries. So when you look at the trade volume right now, many of the products that Pakistan imports from Turkey are those that Pakistan at times can also export abroad as well. So there's a huge gap between, I think, the value additions needed, and I think this is where new sectors, which are the focus of international attention. So you look at renewables, alternate energies, the investments coming in from Turkey. If they do so, that would create larger space to coordinate with international financial institutions, also with global partners as Pakistan makes headway towards climate loss and damage funds. So I think at present, Pakistan's I'd say core interest would be in kind of filling up niches within Turkey's business community, because of course both countries, despite having a lot of growth potential, are ultimately subject to rising economic turbulence in their neighborhoods. And I think at that time it's important to move away from agricultural textiles to value additions. And I think renewable energies, one of the things with that is that once the investments start to come in and you have good investor sentiment to back it up, they can be scaled very rapidly. So the volume that you talked about to reach about even 5 billion, that could even go beyond. So you need political will across administrations, and I think this particular government has done a splendid job reaching out to the business community in a short period of time to kind of set up a longer roadmap for Pakistan to act upon.
Right, absolutely. And there are a couple of things that I'd like to understand a bit more, and perhaps Farooq, you can help me do that, because when we take a look at the interactions within, of course, this relationship, understand the aspects of trade and investment and bilateral trade relations is extremely important. And the aspects that Mr. Hanan was highlighting, of course, we can look into those areas as well. But I want to understand, is it the fact that the emphasis on areas hasn't been correct and that we need to refocus on certain areas, and that's going to help enhance the relationship? And also, is it the fact that when we take a look into, of course, the way that the governments are interacting and the way that the willingness is shown, that's there, of course, but if we really require the business to come in, isn't that also something that perhaps requires way more than just the government support or willingness to bring in businesses? Don't we need perhaps an entire infrastructure for the investors to want to come in as well?
Right, Sana, and that is $1 million question, actually $1 billion question. Earlier when Hanan was talking about bilateral trade, I thought that I would actually draw your attention to the discrepancy between Pakistan's exports and imports with Turkey, right? That is very important. Usually when you look at the numbers, we export less and we import more. And that is a huge, huge problem for Pakistan in every market, with the US, with the exception of US and EU, perhaps everywhere it is the case that we import more, we export less. And there's a very serious gap on the emphasis on, Pakistan keeps on focusing on G to G, government to government. But business to business, B2B, has been the chink in our armor. And repeatedly it has happened that when it came to, setting up the networks or connectivities between the businesses of two sides, we have been found wanting. And this time I'm glad that the Prime Minister is there, because apart from the inauguration and launch of PNS Khyber, there was interaction with business community. And then the Prime Minister also interacted with the head of the ECO bank. That is also important because Pakistan and Turkey both share common interest in Central Asia, and through connectivity we can ensure that more business opportunities can be found, and that exploration, Sana, is also very important. So I'm glad that Prime Minister himself is actually doing exactly what we have been pointing out in the past, that whenever a Prime Minister of Pakistan went abroad and spoke at forums, Usually it was a general speech rather than identifying or pitching various areas of interest or common interest. And this time, as you pointed out earlier, the renewable energy sector is a huge one. At this moment, remember that there is an economic crisis all over the world. Turkey's economy is also in distress, and Pakistan's economy, of course, has been struggling for quite some time. So both these countries working together can create more opportunities for their people, and of course help bring the economy back from the grave.
Absolutely, and that of course is true. And despite that, Turkey of course has been at the forefront of helping Pakistan with regards to these devastating floods as well. So we're very grateful for that.
Yeah.
Mr. Selçuk, considering that the relationship between Pakistan and Turkey is so important to both sides, and we of course are discussing what else that Pakistan can do to bring in more investment within the country. But in terms of what Turkey wants or needs within this relationship, or perhaps desires to get from Pakistan, what aspects can you highlight for us that we understand the Turkish side better?
The previous question about the economic relation, as our esteemed speakers mentions, the relationship between business to business, and tomorrow Prime Minister Shahbaz has a meeting with the businessmen in Turkey, and I believe that these kind of meetings will improve the economic relations, and maybe they can reach to this number, the $5 billion within 3 years. And also, absolutely, the esteemed speakers are right, because business to business is significant, but also the support of the government and state is the most important right now in the world politics, because as we see in the Russian and Ukrainian case, the business to business does not solve the problems when the state has a problem. And in the case of Pakistan-Turkey relations, states are good relation, and if the government relation contribute to business relation, that would be endless, like the long economic relation. And also Prime Minister Shahbaz mentions the One Belt and Road project of China, and he said that Turkey also the part of this project, and the economic relation is going to improve because of these kind of relations. And President Erdogan also mentioned about the relationship between Pakistan and Turkey in UN, OIC, and these economic relations. That's why the world politics also determines the economic relations as well. That's why both leaders discuss this kind of like how to collaborate in world politics, which also improve the economic relation as well. That's why I believe that this relationship will also contribute the economic relation as well, and also other sectors should be focused. And I believe that if both countries improve these kind of meetings, that will also contribute the economic relation. And both countries, I think, should focus on the certain sectors, like in Turkey, as you know, the defense industry is going very well last decade, and also Turkey can contribute, and also Pakistan can contribute in the different areas as well. And the problem of the Pakistan economy, as our senior analyst Farooq mentioned about the problem of the import of the Pakistan economy. That's why I think both countries should focus on the certain sectors, then collaborate each other. And for doing this, and both countries needs the investment centers, because Turkey has a president's investment center in different countries, and I believe that Pakistan has this kind of institution which should also operate in Turkey as well. That will also improve our economic relation.
All right, Mr. Umar, considering, of course, this is what Mr. Selçuk believes is important in terms of the mechanism of, with regards to our relationship with Turkey, is there something perhaps that can be done in terms of setting up such centers or authorities that look after the follow-ups to these visits, and actually work towards the implementation of various aspects? Because of course today we see that there is a discussion on renewable energy, but in terms of actually bringing that to light, there perhaps is required a lot more than just that. And so in order to have perhaps a more focused approach, can that be something that Pakistan should be looking at?
And Umar Saab, I understand that you're going to respond to this question, but one general observation, both our guests on Skype are soft-spoken. So could you speak louder as well so that we sitting in the studio can understand it as well? Please go ahead.
No, no worries at all. I can, of course, speak loud. No worries at all. I think that this is what you say, a tragedy of Pakistan's bilateral relations with a lot of countries, that there is a very big and pompous visit, but it is not followed by anything substantial. Like last time, I believe, and I was shocked when I read those numbers, that there were around 400 meetings between Turkish business groups which were accompanying President Erdogan and with Pakistani businessmen. Or what did come out of those meetings? I think there is a general structural problem when it comes to Pakistan's FDI picture. There needs to be, as we were discussing, centers which can facilitate such FDI into the country, but also there needs to be enhanced coordination between the Foreign Office and the respective ministries of trade and commerce. And also, I mean, we have these business attachés at our respective embassies, but what their progress, their work needs to be also a bit scrutinized as well, because I have this like personal insight. One ambassador of a Middle Eastern country told me that for my own investment projects, I have to put wheels under my files. So if this is something coming from ambassador of a country which is ready to invest in Pakistan, this is not appropriate culture. So there needs to be a lot of soul-searching on our side. With regards to Turkey, I think the only very big plus factor, which probably is not there with any other country in terms of bilateral relationship, is the unique trust and strategic conformity which both nations hold. Pakistan doesn't have any strategic clash with Turkey, any political, you can say, disagreement, and this is again complemented by trust and good relationship on the leadership level. So I think we should have done major improvement by now, but hopefully it will be happening now in the future.
Right, absolutely. And of course, that's indeed an important observation, that we need to actually move forward with a plan to make sure that the meetings that are conducted then actually result into something. But Mr. Hanan, considering the different aspects that we've been covering, there is, of course, the interactions with the business community. But there is, of course, also the important interaction between the peoples of the two sides, the youth of the two sides, the students. And of course, now, since we have such emerging entrepreneurs within our own country as well, and a lot of focus within this world on tech and innovation, there is perhaps a lot of potential over there as well, where we can have collaborations with both countries. Is that something you think can be one of the focuses as well? And if it is, what sort of a collaboration do you think can exist that can help perhaps in more immediate terms?
Yeah, absolutely, Sana. I think that is a major point of consideration. It should be in the future as well. Pakistan's startup industry, despite having certain economic constraints, has been able to flourish. The tech sector has a lot of growth potential, so much so that it has been part of debates in Pakistan's long-standing relationships as far as the U.S. as well. I think a starting point for kind of immediate coordination would be to have this exercise with the support of the Ministries for Investment as well as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and a list of startup and entrepreneurial enterprises. That exercise should be focused on managing expectations. So it's true that Turkey and Pakistan have had trade volumes in the past, which have been steadily increasing by some margins. But it's not necessarily the case that what constituted that trade volume were actually responding to expectations on both sides of businesses. I think Pakistan's startup community in that sense should be taken on board. And after each follow-up visit, one area through which you measure the amount of support that's coming through is based on each sector. So you have the fintech sector, you have others in tech as well. The banking and financial sector would be open to greater coordination. And I think you let those interactions speak for themselves. And when we talk about those kind of expectations, it'll be interesting to get a sense of what Turkish business interests in Pakistan for the future will be from the entrepreneurs themselves. And I think another really important impediment over the years has been for a business to kind of set itself up in Pakistan immediately. And I think that is where efforts to cut down red tape, efforts to cut down approvals and all of that would work well. I mean, we have a case in point. You look to Pakistan's relationship with China. When you look at, for example, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, even under that, when you have official meetings, joint working groups follow up. There's an effort to kind of communicate, okay, these are the impediments that need to be taken apart. Businesses want that. How do we coordinate together? And now you see there's been great smoothness in that relationship. So we do have starting points. I think we just need to manage expectations in a way that's more institutionalized rather than a patchwork approach.
Right, absolutely. Mr. Selçuk Aydin and Mr. Umar Karim, thank you very much for joining us online and being a part of the discussion. Mr. Anand, you'll stay with us for the next segment as well. And of course, Farooq, you too. We'll take a short break and come back and continue the discussion on what the IMF resident has spoken about with regards to Pakistan's plans to flood recovery.
An encyclopedia of Pakistan television. He is Khaja Najmul Hasan. Khaja Sahab, thank you very much to have joined us.
Thank you so much.
You've seen different decades of PTV.
King of Ghazal Mehdi Hasan and King of Ghazal Ghulam Ali and King of Kings of Qawwali Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, and I have worked with all of them. She looked into my eyes while I was talking to her, and she just signed up. हम उसके पास जाते थे मगर आहिस्ता आहिस्ता. PTV is my home. PTV is my family. PTV is a place where I meet all my friends, old and new.
Welcome back to the debate. I'm your host, Sana Makbool, and we're talking about the discussions with regards to the economic conditions within the country. And we're going to focus now on what, of course, has impacted Pakistan earlier this year. And those were, of course, the devastating floods, and we're still trying to recover from them. But what is important in terms of our economic recovery is, of course, our discussions with the IMF and our potential resources in terms of what we're going to be getting with regards to our bilateral and multilateral engagements. And so what has been said now by an IMF resident representative in an interview to Reuters is that this is an important aspect with regards to such discussions, that Pakistan's formulation and finalization of a recovery plan with regards to these floods is an important aspect that will center in the discussions, as well as also factor in the investments coming in through bilateral and multilateral engagements. And that is an important aspect that we are going to be focusing now on. For this, we've also been joined by Mr. Sarmad Iqbal, who's an environmental lawyer, and he's joined us online. Thank you very much, Mr. Sarmad, for being a part of the debate. And I'll start with you, considering, of course, that Pakistan has been trying to deal with the impact of these floods, and then of course all that has come with it in the aftermath as well. And considering our political and economic situation, there's much at the table at the moment for Pakistan to deal with. But when we take a look at the plan with regards to the recovery from the floods and what sort of an aspect in terms of these strategies and timelines will Pakistan have, what do you think is still left in terms of what is needed to actually finalize all of that in terms of the data or an assessment on ground, and what sort of a requirement is there in terms of making sure that we have at least a plan ready to moving forward?
Thank you very much, Sana, for having me on your show. One of the things is that everything is remaining when it comes to being planned for responding to the needs of the people who have been devastated or impacted by this unprecedented flood in Pakistan. Starting from data, we don't know in totality how many people have been affected. The kind of impact that they have suffered on, we can only comprehend the figures with regards to land, with regards to crop, but the mental stress, the psychological impacts, the losing of family members who were the breadwinners leaves a very lasting impact on these families, and this is irrecoverable. Um, the other thing, when we say that flood affected communities are still trying to manage their daily food intake as well. Why? Because there's no means of earning livelihoods. They are displaced. Family members are living in a stressful situation. They don't have homes over their head. The protection issues are there. Health issues are there. Children are falling prey to various diseases, or waterborne diseases are on the rise in those areas. That's everything that's kind of impacting the whole overall scenario of these devastated communities. However, on the other hand, when it comes to government or international aid agencies that are operating in the region, the aid agencies are trying their level best. The government is trying its level best with meagre resources that they have at hand to try to support the affected population, but the devastation is huge, the displacement is huge, the destruction is huge. 33 million people affected by this flood. It's not an easy job to handle. And I salute all the aid agencies and the government functionaries who are trying their level best to reach out to every people who have been affected by it.
Right, absolutely. And Farooq, I want to understand a little bit more in terms of, with regards to, of course, what the IMF has said in terms of this factoring in the discussion as well. As Mr. Samad was pointing out, that there is perhaps a lot that still needs to be done, and perhaps a lot that Pakistan perhaps cannot expedite. But in terms of what we require and need in terms of our economic support, the discussions with the IMF and our bilateral and multilateral supports are very important, and perhaps something that we're relying on. What sort of an impact will any delay or the fact that we don't have a lot of data coming in will have on these discussions?
Again, an important question. I was looking at this statement, which is also important, but which essentially is a result of an accounting problem rather than any kind of concern for the local populace. Because IMF actually needs a plan, a revised plan regarding your spending plan and your budget commitments. That's why they need us to actually incorporate what we are going to spend here into the framework, and then of course that can be used to for the recovery plan, and of course meeting our fiscal targets as well. Right now, when you talk about the overall situation, we have seen the assessments already coming from World Bank, that is to the tune of $33 billion, and we know that as was pointed out earlier, our brethren, our kith and kin are suffering because of a harsh winter that has just set in, and they already are. 33 million people have been impacted. So Pakistan will have to do it quickly to incorporate and to actually revise the framework and present it to IMF and other donor agencies, because it is, time is of the essence. And with these winters, lives might be at stake even right now. Having said that, there are two aspects which are important. Not only lives were impacted, but our, standing crops were destroyed as well. That is also contributing to the inflation in the country, which has reached the daunting number of 30%. Today we saw that. And today, State Bank of Pakistan also raised the policy, policy level, policy rate, and because of that, perhaps we are going to address it. But there was one very important, comment that we cannot overlook, and that is because so many crops are missing in the market, government of Pakistan will have to start importing them quickly. So time is of the essence, and let us hope that these talks with IMF, with other bodies, and the expectation that within the next 3 years, we are going to see billions of dollars flowing in, addressing these concerns is important. But Pakistan government will have to move very quickly and address all these concerns.
Right. Mr. Sarmad, what do you make of the discussions that were held with regards to the COP27? Of course, this was an important aspect that Pakistan took the lead in terms of bringing the loss and damage as part of the conversation. And as a result, we saw that perhaps there was a sort of mechanism that was developed or is going to be further enhanced with regards to what is now being called the Global Shield for countries such like Pakistan and others as well, who of course have been suffering from climate change and potentially will do so in the future as well. Do you think that this mechanism is an important one and can actually help contribute to Pakistan in more immediate terms? Because of course we have a very long-term plan in terms of recovering from the floods, and it's not going to be something that we'll be getting out of soon. And so for now, considering our economic situation, we perhaps need the help as soon as it can come in. How will that factor in, and what do you make of this mechanism?
Well, I've been following the COP debate for quite some time now, and this loss and damage agenda has been up and in the discussion and on the cards for quite some time. However, the organizations or the governments which have been who are basically the problem creators in this world, like the major emitters, they've been playing with this whole agenda of loss and damage, and then they shifted it to a kind of a 3-year dialogue. And then finally this year, the unprecedented monsoon in Pakistan, but also the monsoon rains in Nigeria, Indonesia, and other areas across the globe have compelled the countries to actually escalate this debate around loss and damage, and the effective and efficient diplomacy by our foreign minister, our prime minister, basically paved way for actually the commitment of or establishment of this fund. However, I am a very optimist person, but in this scenario, I feel like I'm moving towards pessimism because of the lack of mechanisms being clarified for transfer of funds. How would this money be actually channeled to the developing countries or the countries who are bearing the impacts of climate change? How would that bifurcation be made? And those are some of the discussions which on the face of it does not look very technical. However, they are very technical in nature when it comes to the actual disbursement. So I really want this mechanism to be fast, swift, so that Pakistan can get a fair share from the polluters, so that it can rebuild its own country. However, this mechanism of loss and damage needs to be further articulated to suit the requirements of all the countries who are facing the brunt of climate change.
Right, absolutely. And Mr. Hanan, this of course means that we have a long way to go in terms of any international consensus in terms of how we're even going to proceed. We've of course seen in terms of discussions around climate change and environment that we are of course at the 27th summit at the COP27, and so a lot that was talked about earlier as well perhaps is still being talked about, but we're glad that things are at least moving towards the right direction. But in terms of the urgency and time that Pakistan needs and other countries countries need with regards to climate change, there may not be enough. And considering that we're in talks with the IMF, the ninth review is still pending, we of course need some sort of clarity, both in terms of plans towards recovery as well, and both of these seem to be uncertain at the moment. On top of that, of course, there is the political instability as well, and our current economic conditions. What do you make of moving forward with regards to our discussions with the IMF, if we have all of these issues, and many of which perhaps seem to be something that Pakistan may not have complete control over? What sort of a plan or discussion should there be with regards to the IMF and other bilateral and multilateral engagements to at least be secure enough in terms of our economic progress?
Yeah, thanks, Sana. So first of all, I think there are many starting points for Pakistan. So first of all, we have to distinguish between, let's say, the long-term assistance needed for the loss and damages, and then the emergency side of it. The long term, I think, if you look at the loss and damages fund, that was never going to be on the agenda. But as talks drag on, these negotiations are going to be, in some ways, 0% effective for people who are confined to open skies and basically need to have a rehabilitation right now and right here. So I think in that sort of a sense, Pakistan's climate minister was spot on by saying that the countries need to come together to at least sanction or release emergency funds for Pakistan, emergency cash, because there's just no credibility to communicating adaptability measures to the common person who has borne the brunt of all of this. And I think that emergency side of things is something that can be built upon now that we have a working consensus on the loss and damages. And then Pakistan, remember, is not a lone fighter in this entire cause. It has been chairing the G77. Delicate negotiations in COP27 were kind of refused or put to the side by many, saying that this is going to be a repeat of the past. But I think the understanding on Pakistan's point of view is that if it takes longer than needed, Pakistan's loss and damages estimates could even climb up. And we see from World Bank estimates as well, 348 billion could be required for Pakistan for climate and development challenges between 2023 to 2030. In terms of kind of quoting support from IMF, look, there's been a lot of talk before, and I think Farooq pointed it out brilliantly about the dependencies faced by Pakistan. I think for the IMF has kind of come clean on the fact that it wants Pakistan to engage multilateral institutions. Pakistan has been borrowing from the ADB as well as bilateral engagements. And I think that's where you could build on the foreign minister's previous stance that these are not circumstances of Pakistan's own making, and hence any arrangement that comes forward needs to be at least in some ways consistent with how those dynamics have changed, the level of damage Pakistan has incurred, the constraints on its GDP, which is going to be slashed by 2050 by 18% even. So I think you could use those bargaining chips to come on board, because look, IMF is not completely averse to these conditions. There's a way through which you engage with them, and I think the government has a good grasp on it. But by engaging multilateral creditors, Pakistan's bilateral lenders, and then looking at these COP27 developments, where of course IMF is also closely monitoring them, I think Pakistan has a pretty good case for kind of bringing short-term returns and then seeing how that adds up with Pakistan's production capacity from crops all the way to rebuilding infrastructure that has been lost.
And Sana, I just wanted to actually one observation regarding language. We have seen that when COP21 actually took place, Paris Accord, so to speak, at that time we thought that there is a commitment regarding climate-related events as well. Then we learned that loss and damages was not covered, and now we are talking about emergency. So language perhaps is the biggest enemy of the people at this moment, the way we keep on dragging our feet. But there are two good examples, Sana, where we can actually draw some solace from it and hope that in coming days there is going to be some kind of massive support as well. One, during the earthquake days, it took us some time to get all the monies, but that came in. And the second example is the COVID days, when IMF actually went to SDR, special drawing, documents and all that. And through that, they created special funds, and some of them actually were sent to Pakistan as well, and Pakistan managed it in time. So I'm still hoping that in coming days, we are going to see massive support coming from international organizations and take care of our business as well.
if I
Absolutely,
may,
and that, of course, is the hope. Thank you. Yes,
Sharma Saab
very
wants
quickly.
to
Go
say
ahead.
something.
well, if I may,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I am very optimistic that if we tap into the right channels, the funds are going to flow in. One of the organizations that I'm associated with, Islamic Relief, they managed to generate to 23 million pounds in less than 2 months for immediate response and now into early recovery. And all of that, or 90% of that money came from Pakistani diaspora, who are very concerned about the conditions in Pakistan. If some of the Pakistani diaspora can generate
Right.
this amount, our government can actually reach out to all of these people across the globe, and there's going to be limitless funds coming in. It's just a matter of how we approach it and how we
Right.
package our response.
Absolutely, you're very right. Of course, there must be many avenues that we still haven't explored and can be looked into further. And we're hopeful that all of the efforts are being made, which require, of course, our inputs and our support, not just from political leadership but the people as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Sarmad Iqbal, Mr. Hanan, and of course Farouk for joining us and being a part of the debate. That's all that we have right now, and the discussion will continue next week. Enjoy your weekend. See you on Monday.